What's good, Salvi fam? Welcome to another episode of the CornerBlue. I'm Andres Rico, and for this episode, Hugo Alvarado is on assignment, just as they say in baseball broadcasts here in the United States. But in any case, for this episode, I wanted to break down the timeline of the events surrounding the most current news regarding the highly coveted men's coaching position for the national team in El Salvador. It's been a topsy-turvy ride within the last couple of weeks, and things are still in the air. I saw a couple rumors or tweets by journalists in El Salvador saying that Las Pesfut has picked their guy. It's just a matter of basically publishing that information, that they just need to get the contract signed and then go public with it. So for now, we're in the wait. But we're going to break down what has been happening the last couple of weeks. So if you didn't hear, as of 12/18, so a week before Christmas, the surprise tweet, mysterious, enigmatic tweet appeared by La Fesfoot saying that there was going to be a press conference and asking members of the press and whatnot, media people, media outlets to connect to a virtual press conference, interestingly enough. And before that press conference even started, there were already reports coming out of Portugal that then coach Rubén de la Barrera had actually been signed by first division side Vizela in the Portugal first division. And lo and behold, that conference was basically to just be a formality and officially announce his departure. And, you know, it's not that much a surprise if you stop and think about it. Basically, I've taken this time just, to meditate on it, think, simmer, rather than just reacting and going with an immediate response. And so that's why it's taking a little bit to sit down, dust off the mic, and give this a shot. But before I get into any of my own opinions, kind of wanted to break down the timeline for what's been going on. And that kind of just gives you a clue as to how things have been handled in, I'd call it, even objectively, a very disjointed or counterintuitive way. I mean, if we turn the clock back a little bit, we realize that in February of 2022, with the qualifiers nearing their end and Salvador basically out, Hugo Perez was re-signed heading into the 2026 qualification cycle. Then you had the whole situation with the Fesfoot getting intervened by the government, then FIFA stepping in to avoid a possible 2-year ban and installing a regularizing committee or an interim committee to get all financial things, legal things sorted out due to the conflicting bylaws of the federation and the laws of the Salvadoran state, which resulted in the naming of Sáenz Marinero as the interim president, who was supposed to be there for a year while all this was sorted out. And during that time, they respected Hugo Perez's contract and ratified him heading into the new qualifying cycle for 2026. So up until that point, we had Hugo Carrillo in the presidency. We saw how things were managed there, and everything went crashing and burning despite some of these moves from within the federation to do some things a little bit different or improve things, especially on the front of recruiting dual nationals or players born abroad. So getting back to it. So Hugo Perez is re-signed for the new qualifying cycle in 2022. And during that span, we know of the negative winless streak, which basically plagued him through his last year and ultimately played a huge factor, I'd say, in his firing or sacking as a coach this year. So yes, so let's get back to it. So he's re-signed 2022. Gold Cup ends versus Panama on July 4th of this year. And the overall sensation of that cup is, people were pretty disappointed that they didn't make it out of the group due to the main issue was a lackluster result against Martinique. 6 days later, after the Copa Oro ended, that's when FESPUT announced the hiring of Diogo Gama as a sporting director, a role that had been left vacant since Diego Enriquez was outed by the previous administration, even before the complete end of the 2022 cycle. Then, on August 29th of this year, the regulating committee, the interim committee of La FESPUT, announced that they were going to be staying an additional year because they hadn't been able to complete the work that was designated to them by FIFA and CONCACAF to regulate the bylaws and issues that the FESPUT had previously been struggling with. And this is cited in public reports and articles about the fact that they hadn't been able to get their hands on certain financial and legal documents due to the government having them in their possession due to legal processes against former members of FESPUT. Then we have the game against Trinidad y Tobago, which took place on September 10th. This is when the whole Garsten Gate, as I call it, occurred, where, basically Will Perez saw the writing on the wall, especially after the defeat to Trinidad and Tobago. And basically you saw like a public outletting of frustration in what would be his final press conference as manager. Then we get the Gama conference on September 12th, announcing his firing. September 12th or 11th. Mentioning that his firing and mentioning that, it was time to move forward. Which I thought was an interesting move, because usually you'd think that an interim board would try and get out as quickly as possible so that elections could be held to elect the new board president moving into the new qualifying round or cycle. Then you think they'd hire a sporting director to start a new process or to ratify the previous one and then bring a coach. But you don't ratify a coach and bring in a sporting director and then within months, not even a year of starting a new qualifying cycle, you sack the manager. And lo and behold, that's what ended up happening. Within, I'd say, 3 weeks of that Gama conference where he went out and mentioned a Libertadores. I don't know why. And I mean, a mistake, I guess, associating Latin America with the biggest club tournament in Latin America. I guess, you can make that mistake. The hiring of Rubén de la Barrera occurred on September 26th, heading into the final match date with Martinique, the head-to-head series, the match home and away, where you saw complete, bulldozing of the previous squad for various reasons, whether players chose not to participate or the coach just was not inclined to call them up. The look, the feel of the team that was fielded for those two matches was completely different. Ultimately, Israel was eliminated from the Nations League. Not the best start that we all would have wanted, and that occurred heading into the second week of October. And this is where things start to get interesting based off of interviews and reports that have come out since Rubén de la Barrera announced that he was moving on to his next venture, his next step in his career. So according to interviews that I've seen and reports that I've seen from El Salvador, the interim president mentioned that by the time El Salvador went into its friendly matches with Curaçao, Rubén de la Barrera had already been approached by Vizela about possibly taking on the role as manager for their club. They're in a relegation battle, and it looked like they needed a fresh start, another take, and De La Barrera had caught their eye. And so by then, according to interim president Sáenz Marinero, they made the attempt of convincing him to stay, considering that it was very early in the project, and it was too soon to turn the page in terms of the interests of the men's team and public image. Then you move forward to December 8th, which was the last day of work. The microciclos got rebranded as campamentos, yet the last camp that was held, or training camp that was held, lasted, I think, a day and a half, included mostly local players. Sorry, I'm not going to say only. And I think it was a total of 3 trainings because, semifinals in the local league were on, or playoffs were going on in the local league. So you couldn't get all of the players, the domestic players. And when I found out that was the last day, to be honest, that's when red flags started going up for me, mainly because the friendly match with Inter de Miami, which had recently been announced, is scheduled for January 19th. And that would have been a whole month of not hardly getting any work done. It just seemed like a really early time to go on vacation. And I was speaking about this with my friend Jordi in Barcelona, and his take is it seemed like a perfect amount of time vacation wise, considering that also like labor or the work schedule or work or vacation time in Spain is viewed significantly different than in the United States or obviously in El Salvador. But something seemed off when not only the sporting director, there's reports of not only the sporting director, but the manager heading out when there still seemed to be some time to get some work in, where not even the domestic league had concluded yet. So something seemed off at that time. And I just remember thinking, where's this going? You're short ending the men's national team as well as the U20s team by not getting any more trainings in before the beginning of pretty serious competition for the U20s and then important friendlies for the national team. I mean, it's not every day that you have a player like Messi roll through El Cusca. Then within 10 days of that, on the 18th, is when this virtual press conference that I mentioned took place, announcing Rubén de la Barrera officially joining Vizela and leaving La Selecta, which at the time, and I mean at this point too, it's disappointing to see the national team being handled the way that it is. We've spoken many times on the profile that you can expect when it comes to foreign coaches coming in and taking the reins of La Selecta. They tend to be low profile coaches. Experience tends to be minimal or very low key. And the standards here are so low that it doesn't seem like it's going to be a difficult gig on paper, in the sense that the scrutiny you could assume from the outside without knowing the idiosyncrasies of the culture here, the press, and how football is managed in the country. You'd assume that, oh, you know, you're going to a smaller country with not that much history, and it should be a time where, you know, you get a couple of results. It's a line on your CV, on your resume. It's a national team, and then you move on and copy and paste. Um, so from the get go, you could only assume that something like that was going to happen. Did I think the turnaround was going to be this quick? No way. No way. That I think is the most surprising. I think I saw a report as well listing off the coaches and their 10 years of the last 20 something years. And the shortest one was Carlos Cabañero, who was here, I think it was like 2003, 2004. That's the guy from Argentina that ended up calling a 14-year-old to the senior squad. Yeah, it made news, but not the best of looks when you're trying to promote some seriousness or show seriousness in your program. So I think at this time, you look at that timeline that I shared and how some of these steps have been mismanaged along the way. By the regulating committee being in an additional year, it's very concerning because it means what is taking so long? And the more they're there, and they themselves have mentioned that their expertise is in the business side of things, the legal part of things, but not necessarily the football side of things. And that's not only did they expose it, but their actions have exposed it along the way. And I think by dynamiting a process that was already set, and yes, it had its potholes along the way. Yes, there were mistakes along the way, mistakes that were very costly ultimately. I don't know if you could consider the current situation an improvement of how things were going at the end of the Gold Cup this past summer, or at the end of, or midway through September, once we were knocked out of the Nations League. I don't think you could think, or I don't think this is an improvement to that. Here we are. It's almost the end of the year. We've been without a coach for a week and a half. Competition is within 3 weeks. And the World Cup qualifying cycle starts in June. It's very concerning. It's disheartening. It's frustrating. But I think the writing's been on the wall this whole time. I remember during Gold Cup watching a video on Instagram of someone on a show saying that El Salvador had peaked offensively. And I was like, oh, no way. Haven't they seen Mayat up top? Like, he's only got maybe 3-4 caps in. Like, haven't they seen some of the new pieces? But unfortunately for now, I sit corrected. You know, we're not seeing highlights coming out of Colombia on the Hill brothers. You have a very disjointed team because the Rubén de la Barrera effect took place, and we saw a whole different roster or call up focusing on players that hadn't been seen in the U20s, had not been seen in the U23s much. And then it seemed like a lot of the older players were continued to being ostracized by the now ex-coach. A lot of the foreign-based players that were persuaded by Hugo Perez's professionalism or the way that he was handling the team have seemed to be ostracized or have isolated themselves. So at this point, we sit, wait, see how things go. I wonder what we'll get first, the new year or the announcement of the new coach. But yeah, it's been an interesting year thus far. You know, I'd say some of the highlights would be, you know, getting the trip to Asia, seeing the performance against Korea was something I'd say one of the high points. Also, the Nations League matches against the U.S. were another reminder of what this team can do despite its deficiencies. But yeah, in the meantime, we wait. I honestly think that unless some stars align and they get the right coach and he's able to do the right casting in a super small or confined amount of time, things are looking pretty bleak for June. Yeah, I wouldn't bet too much money on La Selecta if you even do, because if you do, ooh, you must have hella squirrel on hand to be dropping on La Selecta. But yeah, my hope is somehow, you know, being as optimistic as possible that this time they pick someone that has a little more commitment, that doesn't see us as only a stepping stone, that's going to honor their contract or their commitment, and not just dip out when things get rough or are inconvenient. And I think that also is a testament to all the other coaches that have stuck around, but not many of them had. And in that sense, I do salute the Hugo Perez era, that you saw him wearing different hats. You saw him working alongside Jerson and Diego Enriquez, all wearing different hats, all working on a Walmart budget and doing the best that they could to get results. And it's something that we've seen in other tenures as well. But it's just funny that they were ostracized or held under so much scrutiny because they were foreign. And here we see that we've been hearing from them on interviews with other outlets. We've heard it here, speaking to them personally, some of the obstacles that they had along the way. And, you know, they didn't dip out on the first opportunity that they could. So I think if this program wants to grow, it needs to become more serious. And we're going to need a long-term board calling the shots and giving the keys away to the right people. Because so far we just continue to be a joke. And to me, that's very unfortunate. But as someone with a good sense of humor, you gotta love the joke. You gotta stay committed somehow. You gotta see the bright side to it. We have the game against Messi to look forward to. I was thinking of going, but when I saw those prices, I was like, no, there's no way. I can't go to that. Like, el chiste era ir con la familia, estar con tu gente, and just knowing how basically that game is being paywalled to the extreme, how it's being gate kept to the extreme. Unfortunately, it just doesn't entice me to go. And that's that I haven't gone to Charlotte in 7 years, and I desperately want to. But there's no way I can expect, you know, family there to invest that type of coin in a match that is a exhibition match. We don't know how many minutes Messi's actually going to play. Will it be historic and exciting? Definitely. But then reality hits. So yeah, I think I'm gonna conclude it on that. This is the best I can come up with. We'll be on Coach Watch, on that White Smoke Watch, and hopefully we'll be able to hop on, do an emergency pod with Urul and see what's the road that lies ahead, because it's continuing to be bumpy. But we need to stop being a sideshow and move towards something more serious. But that starts with the people in charge. That's it. All right. I'll catch you guys next time. And hopefully we'll have some more stuff to talk about. And for everyone that's been reaching out, giving shout outs, I appreciate you. I appreciate all of you. Because, yeah, we're all in this together. We all can sit back and either scratch our heads or just go with the flow, and also keep scrolling to find out what the news is. So happy holidays to all of you. Hope you have a great 2024. I know Uwo and I appreciate all the support that you've given us in 2023, with all the ups and downs, mostly downs, but we're still here. We're still at it. This is something that we enjoy doing. And we appreciate all y'all who tune in and listen to us. And we'll see you guys next year.